What are your favourite morally ambiguous and morally unambiguous settings? Can a game system be ethically grey?
Fight your way through Professor Genki's Super Sparkle Lab for fun and profit.
Now, with every man, woman, and tiger shot, your prize money goes up. But look out, no one likes it when you shoot a panda. Unethical.
My general instinct is to prefer morally ambiguous settings, because that way you can set up moral questions, which I find interesting. A lot of my games contain elements that could be mischaracterized as a very complicated trolley problems, I suppose. It's those conflicts, and seeing how players through their characters can inhabit different moral schema and have to think about how their character's morality would interact with the problem rather necessarily than their own moral sense. So I tend to prefer morally grey settings. That said, I have been turned off that a bit and more switched on to morally absolute settings, because a lot of people bring moral ambiguity into games where it probably shouldn't exist, and I'm guilty of that myself, I suppose. But things like D&D, getting rid of alignments and so on when it's so integral to the cosmology of the setting and everything, that seems like a fool's errand to me to do that. But setting-wise, I like the idea of Warhammer Fantasy more than Warhammer 40,000, because Warhammer 40,000 is so utterly absolute. But I feel that Warhammer Fantasy has a bit more moral greyness and darkness to it. But modern settings, even with supernatural elements, tend to be more morally ambiguous, and that's the arena that I'm still more comfortable in, even though my interest is drifting towards settings where there is a moral black and white, because that is different to reality. And so I'm finding that interesting, and a way in which I can engineer some sort of compassion for people like religious fanatics and so on, who see the world in a black and white way, or ideological fanatics who see the world in a black and white way, which makes games educational, which is death. So shh. But that's what I find interesting. Morally unambiguous settings, I generally don't find that interesting in play. I talked about my problem with running games in Warhammer, where it's very hard to be morally ambiguous. So I tend to prefer these things when they're much more definite. So I couldn't tell you a setting that I find particularly engaging that is morally unambiguous. So I tend to prefer modern games or near future games, things like Cyberpunk, where everything's a shade of grey, because it allows for more complex moral problems and issues. But that's just me.
Today, see, I don't like I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity.